Hello everyone, and welcome to our special final episode of our Budget Builds Monthly series for Season 2. Let's see what we have in this month's Budget Builds Monthly episode. Before we get into it, I want to give a quick insight as to what we do for this series. We take your budget and answers from a request form. In the video description, there's a link to a Google form. It slowly gets updated every so often. With this information, we try to build the best computer we can to fit your means. Unless there are budget constraints, we spec out systems on AMD and Intel, both using their DDR4 and DDR5 Gen platforms. Once the build lists are complete, we compare each build using online benchmarks and list out the pros and cons between the top builds from the benchmarks. Using those, then we can determine what build is the best for your use case. But we can't do any of that without your input. Speaking of the Google form, let's see how you fill it out. Just in case you forgot or you're new to the channel, here's how we fill out the budget builds request form. Now, budget builds do not include taxes, fees, or Windows keys unless stated otherwise. We do not collect your Google information. Just don't worry about that. You don't have to sign in. Budgets are in USD. Now you can select your type of system, whether you want gaming, working, or a combination of the two. Form factor preferences. This will determine what case we go with. So if you go for a mini ITX, then we'll go with a mini ITX case. Or if you go for ATX, then we'll go for at least an ATX case. Now you can let us know down in the comments at the end of this if you want a mini ITX board within full ATX case, but we'll get there when we get there. Next up is CPU and GPU preferences. If you want an Intel CPU, AMD CPU, NVIDIA GPU, AMD GPU, other preferences, or no preference at all. Now here's your area of focus. Now these are in hierarchical format. So if you want us to focus on your CPU first, I would put focus first here, and then second, third, all the way to focus last. So if we have any money left over in your budget, or we can shift things around, we'll start in this order and work our way to the end. Now, if you don't care about anything like your case or your power supply or things like that, or your memory, you can either put these at the end or just say focus last, and we'll move on from there. Now, if you already purchased or own any system components you want to use in this next system, just put them in the format of, let's say, storage, 500 gigabyte, and then if it's an M.2 SSD, a SATA SSD, whatever it is, there's no sense in buying two cases or a double power supply if you already have it. Now, any peripherals you want, a mouse, keyboard, a monitor, headset, or pretty much anything you want, just put here in this other category or just select it and we'll add it into the build. Now, any other request you can put here, like if you want RGB, no RGB, again, any other request, just put in this bottom here. Quick disclaimer, prices will vary if any sales are going on or stock changes at the time of recording. Because of this, we tried to get the budget builds as close or slightly over the stated budget. Unless asked, we are not including taxes, shipping costs, OS keys, or peripherals in the final cost from the budget. Alright, this user has a budget of 709 USD or 650 euros. Now, 650 euros is actually 687 USD. So we'll probably just stick with that 709 or 650 euros. They want a gaming type of system, no form factor preference. For CPU and GPU preferences, the user requests an AM5 build for games that are good now, but upgradable in 2 to 3 years. So given the case, we'll probably build one AM4 system given that budget, and then compare that to our systems at the end, but we'll probably just focus on our AM5 builds. I mean, once we start this build off, then we'll actually compare later on. And see if it's worth it keeping that upgradability path in 2 to 3 years without having to do an entire overhaul. But when we get there, we'll get there. For areas of focus, focus first on GPU, then our CPU, memory, and power supply, then motherboard, and so forth. So because it's a gaming system, we can probably get a decent GPU, and then a CPU with some integrated cooler. Motherboards are going to be pretty much the same since there's no form factor preference. We can probably find some bundle deals that will help us with this budget. And then memory, since it's AM5, we can probably just get a 32 gig kit for a decent amount. And then power supply is probably like a 750 watt gold. For our peripherals, the user has a quad HD monitor and wants us to find them a mouse and keyboard. I mean, mouse and keyboard are pretty much all user dependent, as there's so many different types of keyboards. You got membrane, you got mechanical. We'll probably just pick a decent keyboard and mouse, but something that's more of like a placeholder for the user to choose later on. And then finally, for other requests, we want a little RGB and see if we can search for shops in the Netherlands on PC Part Picker if it's applicable. If not, it's also fine. And thank you for the nice comments. So yeah, seems like we're doing an international build as our final episode of season 2. So let's get into these builds and see what we can build for 709 USD or 650 euros. To start things out, here's our template build that we're going to be building our PCs off of. Now everything except for our power supply is more or less of a placeholder. It's all up to the user's choice whether they want a mid-tower case, a micro ATX case, if the PC components fit, or anything of that nature. Same thing for the keyboard and mouse. I just picked this one from HyperX because it's a nice RGB wired gaming keyboard, and this Logitech G502 is a wired optical mouse with multi-buttons. Now again, it's all up to the user what they want. We're just going to use this as a template to start building out our PCs on. Now, you can probably go to your local marketplace and find like a cheap $15 case that is an ATX mid tower or even full tower and just pretty much build it off of that for less than this one from Amazon. So we're just going to start out with our AM4 build to see what we can build with that. I know the user kind of specified they wanted an AM5 build, but I just wanted to take a look at the different PCs we can build off of this template build. So without further ado, let's check out our AM4 build and see what we got. Here's our AM4 build. We went with the Ryzen 5 5600X. It's a 6-core, 12-thread, 3.7 GHz boosted to 4.6. This does have an integrated cooler, which is going to be a theme that we're going to see across all of our builds if we're able to do that. For our motherboard, we went with the Gigabyte B450M. Now, I know this is a B450M board, but it does have Wi-Fi. For our RAM, we went with a 32 gig kit of DDR4 3600 CL18 from Corsair. For the price of a 16 gig kit versus a 32 gig kit, we could probably drop this down a little bit and see what other system components we can upgrade, but it only adds $15, so I don't really think we can add anything else. For storage, we have the Kingston NV2 1TB PCIe 4.0x4 NVMe SSD. For a graphics card, we have the RX 6650 XT from Speedster. And then our case, power supply, keyboard, and mouse from our template build all stays the same, sitting at that $700 total. Now, if you get this AM4 build, you will need to upgrade your BIOS on the motherboard to support the Ryzen 5 5600X. All right, now let's check out our AM5 build and see what we got for that. So given that tight budget, this was the only AM5 build we could do. We have the Ryzen 5 8400F. It's a 6-core, 12-thread, 4.2 GHz boosted to 4.7. Does have an included cooler. For motherboard, we went with the MSI Pro A620M. It's a micro ATX AM5 motherboard that doesn't have Wi-Fi. Now, quick suggestion here: if you're going to upgrade it in a couple years, spend more money and get a Wi-Fi motherboard so you don't have to actually rebuy that or buy an accessory to then get Wi-Fi on your motherboard. For our memory, we went with the Kingston Fury Beast. I know it's an 8 gig stick of DDR5 6000 CL30, but if we're still on that upgradability in 2 to 3 years, 8 gigabytes is kind of on that line. 16 gigabytes is kind of ideal now for gaming, but for the current moment, you actually should be fine. For our storage, we have the Kingston NV2 1TB. It's a PCIe 4.0x4 SSD. Then the case, power supply, keyboard, and mouse are all from our template build. And it brings us to a total of 707 USD, pretty much at that USD budget. Now, I just want to take a look at the ideal AM5 system to build out, and then we'll compare everything. Then we'll take a look at the bundle deals, and then finish out with the international marketplace. And here's our ideal AM5 system with the Ryzen 5 8400F, same 6-core 12-thread processor from before. For our motherboard, we have the Gigabyte B650M. It is a micro ATX motherboard that does support Wi-Fi. For memory, with a single stick of Kingston Fury Beast. This is an RGB stick of DDR5 6000 CL30 RAM. And then our storage, video card case, power supply, keyboard, and mouse are all from our previous build, sitting $60 to $70 over our budget. But here's where I'm going to explain why. If you want to upgrade in a couple of years, You want to make sure that your upgradability path doesn't require you to actually repurchase certain components. So you want a motherboard that does support Wi-Fi, that also supports your means. It does have an M.2 slot, so we're perfectly fine for that. This does include a CPU cooler, so even if you do upgrade your CPU down the line, this one at least does have a CPU cooler capable of cooling most AM5 CPUs. And then our memory, you can just throw another stick of this 16 gig kit for another $60. Now you could technically get an 8 gig stick of RAM like we saw beforehand, and then later on upgrade to 16 gigabytes of overall for dual channel memory. But I mean, it's all up to the user what they want. Now, getting that single stick of 8 gigabytes of RAM will drop down the price overall. And then remember that getting 16 gigabytes later on for dual channel memory. And everything else pretty much is staying. 750 watt gold power supply, perfectly fine for anything upgrading down the line. This case you can probably end up switching out for like a mini ITX case. If we do that right now, we can see that even picking this Thermaltake S100 Snow Edition, it's still the same price overall. Now we still have time to take a look at some bundle deals. We will do a CPU comparison after we take a look at the bundle deals, and then we'll see about the international marketplaces again for the Netherlands. And then that should determine what kind of PC we can build given this budget. Now, I don't think there's a Micro Center in the Netherlands, but I just wanted to do my due diligence. We're going to do Micro Center and Newegg bundle deals to see what we can get. So here are the available bundle deals on Micro Center for AMD. We only have a budget of 243 USD, and it doesn't seem like we can actually build any of these AM5 systems out. Even if we tried to do an AM4 system, we just don't have that budget to work with. Now, even if we were to drop down a few things from our list, we wouldn't be able to do a bundle deal with Micro Center. Now let's check out Newegg. So I've been taking a look at a lot of these CPUs on the AMD side, and a lot of these are just AM5 CPU, AM4, AM5. And based on the budget we have, they're all very much doable in their own degree. Like we can get a Ryzen 5 5600 GT for 130 that comes with a DDR4 kit of RAM. That alone would shift us 105 for the CPU, and then $50 for the 32 gig kit of RAM that we had for our AM4 build. So a lot of these deals are very, very helpful, but we are working with a very tight budget for AM5, and there is no CPU cooler included. But like this Ryzen 5 8600G does have an included cooler and is 170. If we combo it with something else, we get $15 off that. But a lot of these with that really strict budget is very difficult to find. So we'll just check out CPU comparison and move on. And here we have our CPU comparison. Now this isn't a gaming comparison yet, we'll take a look at that next. But here we have our Ryzen 5 5600X and our Ryzen 5 8400F, AM4, AM5. Now I was able to find an i5 12600KF that's kind of in line with our Ryzen 5 8400F build, well, our AM5 ideal 8400F build on Newegg's bundle deals. Now we can see that the i5 12600KF is actually beating our Ryzen 5 8400F, but the user specified that they wanted an AM5 build. We'll pretty much just stick with this when we go to do our gaming comparison. So with this out of the way, let's check out some gaming comparison and go from there. So here on Assetto Corsa, we can see that it's 1080p gaming with a 7900 XTX, not the graphics card we have, but a FPS comparison that we want to check out. Now our RAM is actually DDR5 6000 CL30 and not 36, but we'll just continue comparing on and seeing what we get. Now it seems that our Ryzen 5 5600X pretty much blows the Ryzen 5 8400F out of the water. But we do have to remember that both of these PC builds are upgradable in a couple of years no matter what. So if the user does want an AM5 build, I would just stick with the ideal one that we have, as in a couple of years you can probably get a better CPU and beat that Ryzen 5 5600X. So we kind of just built that AM4 system just to take a look at and see what you can do for gaming in its current standpoint. But depending on the game, at 1080p gaming, they are close, but sometimes the Ryzen 5 5600X is better. Alright, now that we have all of that squared away, let's check out the international marketplace and see if we can build a PC that way. So I found this store called Magecko. I hope I pronounced it right. It's kind of like a Newegg, but for the Netherlands. Now hopefully this has what we want, so let's check it out. And if I'm right, this is all in euros. So they have these things called upgrade kits, which are just their version of bundle deals. And the pricing seems decent. So you start kind of doing the conversion and realize that 251 is around 263, and then it jumps all the way to 554. And this is for an i3 13100, so not the best of pricing. So I'm looking back, and these upgrade kits I feel like are priced to be, you already have your system and you just want to upgrade the main components, and not really like a bundle deal if you're building a brand new system, which I guess is why they're priced so high. We have a budget of 650-ish euros. We have $100 then to spend on a graphics card, a case, a power supply, and an SSD, and a cooler, because the i5 13600K does not come with a cooler. And that's about it for Magecko. Now we're here back on PC Part Picker because I just wanted to finalize everything out. Now here is our ideal AM5 system that I recommend getting. Again, you can always drop this thing down to an 8 gig stick like a regular AM5 system. Choice is up to you for the user. But I took a moment and rebuilt this list using the Netherlands portion of PC Part Picker, as they actually opened it up to that quite some time ago, and I just didn't realize it. Now real quick, Newegg also does ship to the Netherlands, so we may or may not see Newegg prices on the new list. So here's our Netherlands version of the AM5 system that we built. Same Ryzen 5 8400F. We have an ASRock A620M micro ATX Wi-Fi motherboard, that 8GB stick of DDR5 6000 CL40. Now this was the only stick of RAM that was actually in stock given the price. I would still get a CL30 stick of that 8GB, but it just wasn't in stock at the moment. And then that same Kingston NV2 1TB. Maybe we could go with something else, but I mean, these are Amazon prices. For a graphics card, we went with the, it says Sparkle, but it's the Intel Arc A580. Now this does beat the RTX 3050, as well as the 6600 XT. The thing it does not beat is our 6650 XT, so I'd still get one of these if you can. And then I switched out our PC case to this Mars Gaming Micro ATX Mini Tower case, as it was the cheapest one available. Power supplies, keyboard, and mice all stayed the same, sitting $125 over our budget. And that leaves us with this. We have our 3 AM5 systems. They all have the Ryzen 5 8400F. The real difference is the one is one that's in your budget. This one is the one I recommend getting, the ideal AM5 build that has the upgradability path. And this last one that we just built is one using the local marketplaces for the Netherlands. So that makes these three our clear winners. User, it's all up to you which one you should get. Same thing goes with any of the parts that we have labeled as placeholders. Choice is up to you. There's plenty of marketplaces out there to check out that hardware specifically. User, I hope we answered this build for you. It kind of doesn't seem like we did, because it is a very difficult build. AM5 on a $700 USD budget, especially one you can upgrade in a couple of years. It is very difficult given the current criteria of AM5 and DDR5. And that leaves us with this. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Fill out that Google form. And I'll see you all in the next season.